Ethan Crumbley, case number 279506 FC.
Thank you and good morning. Council appearances for the record.
Good morning, Your Honor. Karen McDonald on behalf of the people of the state of Michigan.
Thank you, Mark Peace, on behalf of people.
Good morning, Your Honor. David Williams on behalf of the people.
Call up Michelle Lofton on behalf of Ethan Crumbley.
Amy Hop on behalf of Ethan Crumbley.
Good morning, Your Honor. Deborah H. McKelvey on behalf of the people.
Thank you and good morning to all council. You may all be seated. Defense, ready to proceed with your next witness?
Yes, I could just have a moment to connect the PowerPoint, please.
Absolutely.
Defense will call Dr. Colin King to the stand.
Thank you. Doctor, you're going to approach the witness stand. You're going to stand in the witness box, face my clerk to be sworn, please.
Please raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, do you swear or affirm the statements you're about to make to the court will be the whole truth?
Thank you. Good morning, sir. If you could please state your full name for the record and spell your last name.
Sure, my name is Colin King. C is in Charlie, O-L-I-N, last name King, K-I-N-G.
Thank you. Defense, your witness.
Thank you. Dr. King, I'll let you get situated. Let me know when you're ready.
Thank you. I am ready.
Okay. Doctor, what is your highest qualification for education?
I have a PhD in counseling psychology
And where did you obtain your degree?
from Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan.
What licenses do you hold?
I am a fully licensed psychologist, and I'm also licensed as a professional counselor, so I'm dually licensed.
What certifications do you have?
So I'm certified as a board forensic counselor, a board certified sentence mitigation specialist, a certified advanced addiction specialist.
Have you ever had your license revoked or suspended?
No, ma'am.
Where did you do your internship?
So I did my internship in Michigan City, Indiana, and that's at a psychiatric hospital that treats children, adolescent, and adults. And then I did a second internship at Southwest Detroit Community Mental Health, working with patients with chronic mental health issues and poly substance abuse.
Your Honor, just for the record, it appears the witness is consulting some documents. Can we just identify what those are?
Thank you, sir. What do you have that's currently with you on the witness stand?
Sure, I submitted a copy of my CV.
Thank you. And is that what you're referring to?
Yes, yes.
People, do you have a copy of the CV?
Yes, Your Honor. He's got a whole binder. I just want to make sure I understand what he's consulting.
Yeah, I can absolutely tell you what is in my binder, sir.
Sure, there's no need, sir. If you could please set the binder aside and let's
Okay.
specifically ask to refer to it.
Okay.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Absolutely. Your resume indicates that you also lectured at a number of universities. Can you describe that?
Yes, so I've, as an adjunct professor, I've lectured at Wayne State, Eastern Michigan University, Ashland University, and University of Detroit Mercy.
And what courses did you teach there?
I taught classes in multicultural issues and psychological testing.
You also worked as a special education consultant, is that correct?
That is correct.
And what did you do there?
I consult with one of the charter schools in Michigan, doing IEPs and psychological testing.
You also have listed that you are a brain injury expert. Can you tell me about your experience treating brain injury and or mental illness?
Absolutely. So I've worked with a large Midwestern brain injury facility, actually one of the largest in Michigan. And over the last maybe 23 years or so, I have treated various forms of brain injuries, mental illness, and patients with polysubstance abuse. In fact, I was tasked as a part of my assignments, tasked with supervising teams of occupational therapists, physical therapists, nurses, and psychologists. I've traveled to different states and met with neurologists and assessed patients who were injured due to maybe auto accident or spinal cord injury or stroke. Had an opportunity to look at their medical records and review their records with physicians, and then returned back to Michigan and set up treatment programs for them. I also traveled to Loma Linda University, which is one of the largest, which has one of the largest cadaver labs in the nation, and had opportunity to meet with a neuropathologist and got a chance to look at various models of the brain, to handle the brain and to see how it works. I've also attended various lectures at the Amen clinics, and you may know he's the award winner on Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. I actually had my own brain scanned. And so that gives me my experience in brain injury.
Have you ever testified at any juvenile life cases before?
I have.
In what counties?
Wayne, Macomb, Genesee, and I think Jackson.
In the last 3 years, approximately, how many juvenile lifers, homicide, or competency cases have you testified in?
Probably about 24, 25.
Have you been previously qualified as an expert?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to have Dr. Colin King as an expert in mental health, forensic psychology, and brain injury.
Judge, I understand he's interviewed, I'm sorry, may I, Judge?
Yes.
I understand that he's interviewed the defendant and he's here as a mitigation specialist, and I don't have any issue with that. There's nothing in his report or in the record to indicate that this defendant had any kind of brain injury. So I would object to his qualification on that simply because it's not relevant to this proceeding.
Thank you. As it relates to any brain injury, unless there's going to be foundation laid that this defendant has brain injury, then that's not appropriate. However, I will qualify this witness as an expert in mental health and forensic psychology. Is that correct?
That is correct.
He is so qualified.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor, we do have a demonstrative PowerPoint to explain his report.
Thank you.
All right, so I want to go over the process that was taken. Is it working? Yeah. Just go to the next one. So let's start with the process. It is my understanding that you became involved in this case in December of 2022. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
All right. And can you tell me what you did first?
So I spent approximately 23 to 24 hours testing Ethan Crumbley over about 6 sessions. And I used about 15 different assessments, and I've turned in my report, which is about a 6 to 9 to 70 page report.
Some of the testing, was it done in person?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
And then some of the testing, was it done on computer or by Zoom?
It was done virtually. Yes, ma'am.
So you interviewed him multiple times, approximately 1 year after the incident, a little bit longer than 1 year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Were you also given a litany of records, videos, text messages, and reports to review?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you then do research to gather data and establish the standards that are required?
I did.
Here, we also have that you consulted with a Dr. Malcolm Court, that is a sociologist. Why is it important to peer review?
Well, because I wanted a different discipline to look at my work and to provide me feedback on my work. I wanted to make sure that it was not just my personal opinion, but that my work was based on testing and solid scientific evidence.
And Your Honor, I'll draw your attention to Exhibit O, the CV of Dr. Malcolm Court, and Exhibit P, the report of Dr. Malcolm Court, which reviews Dr. King's findings.
Thank you.
You want to move to the next one?
Judge, if I may, I believe we stipulated the admission of exhibits with the understanding Dr. Court was a witness. And so I had some questions for Dr. Court, and now, but it sounds like he's not going to testify. So I have an issue with the court using his report as a basis, as evidence in this case, without the chance to cross-examine.
So Dr. Court was not listed on my witness list. I did have conversations with Mr. Keys, the fact that Mr. Court would not be called. This should not be a surprise at all. And they did not object to my exhibits.
Judge, I'll do with this to weigh the evidence the court should consider. Thank you.
Thank you. The court will apply the appropriate weight, noting that the doctor will not be testifying. You may
Thank you.
proceed.
So as a brief overview, what is it that you looked at in regards to this case to form an opinion?
Sure. So I looked at Ethan's early life. I looked at the parental influences and activities. I looked at the Oxford school system, testing results, events leading up to the shooting, the day of shooting, and a review of mental illness.
I'll move to the next one. All right, so let's talk about early childhood experiences. Can you discuss that?
Absolutely.
Again, Your Honor, he's consulting.
He has the
something.
PowerPoint.
Okay, it's simply the PowerPoint.
Yeah, this is this is an exact copy.
Let me step in. Anytime you're referring to something on the witness stand, the parties need to be aware of what you're looking at. And so you just can't just pick something up and start reviewing it. First, the defense attorney or the prosecutor has to prompt you to look at something. So what are you currently looking at, sir?
I have an exact copy of the PowerPoint that is on the screen, sir.
Thank you. And that's the only thing that you're looking at right now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may continue.
Thank you. All right, so let's start again. Early childhood experiences. What did you come across when examining all of the evidence and discussing the matter with Mr. Crumbley?
Certainly, in my review of the records, I saw that as early as age 10, matter of fact, even going back to age 6, there were some issues. I interviewed a neighbor, and looking at the records, which were corroborated, is that he was left unattended as early as age 6. He will go across to the neighbor's house, especially when there was like a thunder shower, and reported that he was afraid and would ask for help. And they would ask him where were his parents, and his response was, "I don't know." In the records, at age 10, there's text messages between Ethan and his mom saying to her, "When are you going to come home?" And there were no responses. In my interview with Ethan, he explained that he spent countless hours watching various adult games. Some of them are in my report, and Assassin's Creed, Grand Theft Auto. And he also spent an inordinate amount of time going to different websites and indulging in various graphic scenes and indicated after a while, he began to fantasize about being part of those scenes. So he sort of lost track of reality.
You also have listed trauma. What is trauma?
Trauma is sort of an insult to the person, an insult to the brain. So it could be as a result of parental discord. It could be as a result of high levels of anxiety or high levels of depression. Anything that insults the person's brain can be classified as trauma.
What about constant stress from parents fighting?
Yes, parental dysfunction, constant and intense dysfunction can induce trauma. In my interview with Ethan and in a review of the records also, there's frequent references to either parent threatening to commit suicide. And on some occasions, Ethan has had to be the one intervening at such a young age.
What about the loss of a grandparent or the loss of an animal, especially in a violent death?
Absolutely. Ethan disclosed that one of his sort of soulmate was a large dog that he cherished, and it died at home, and he was the one tasked with having to remove it and take it back to the shed and figure out how to dispose of it.
And you saw the Google searches where he actually is looking how to dispose of a dog that has passed away. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
What about the loss of a best friend?
The loss of a best friend and perhaps your only friend could be a pretty traumatic experience, as in the case of Ethan. And as seen in the record, he spent hours and hours communicating with his best friend and pouring out his heart and disclosing what was happening to him.
Were you also told what his mother told him when that friend went away to a rehab?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was that?
She told him that he would probably never see his friend again.
Let's move on. Dr. Keating, when he testified last week, touched on ACEs. Can you explain what that is to the court?
Yes, so I think in 1995 and 97, my year could be off. The CDC and Kaiser commissioned a study where they looked at 17,000 people. And they have established what is called ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. And what the researchers saw was that between the ages of 0 to 18, children exposed to abuse, physical or emotional, mental, parental dysfunction, or incarceration, the more ACEs someone has, the more likely they are to have mental health issues. In fact, what the researchers discovered is that with 6 or more ACEs, the probability of that person dying 20 years earlier than their peer is greatly improved.
And were you able to find a number of these factors when you interviewed Ethan as well as reviewed the records?
Yes, ma'am.
In a number of our conversations, you had discussed a feral child. What is a feral child?
So a feral child, and I would love to read the definition if I can.
If you can give us the definition, that would be fine.
Certainly. It's essentially a child who has been abandoned. Initially, this phenomenon was known as someone who is abandoned physically. But then there is an emotional and a psychological construct to it. So what the researchers saw is that someone who is abandoned has what is called arrested development. Hence, they lack social skills. They lack social awareness. They lack social cues and essentially become misfits in society.
And why do you feel that this is relevant in your review of this case?
So when I interviewed Ethan and just looked at his profile, at his high level of isolation, lack of parental support, lack of guidance, lack of resources. So psychologically and socially, he can be considered a feral child.
You also had the opportunity to review some text messages between Ethan's parents, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And Your Honor, just for your notes, it is Exhibit F.
Thank you.
I apologize, Exhibit G. And in those text messages, were you able to see where they were discussing situations that Ethan was going through as early as March or even October of 2020?
Yes.
And what did those text messages show you?
So very clear indication that his parents were not in tune to what was going on with him. In this string of text messages, he actually woke up in their room one day, and the mom and dad they were exchanging text messages, and they were sort of joking that Ethan was asking, "What am I doing in you guys' room?" And one of the text messages stated that he seemed to be under the influence of substances. And one parent asked the other, "Did you give him one of your Xanax?" And she said, "No, melatonin."
Okay. So do those text messages show that Ethan was experiencing things that his parents at least were observing at this point?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, let's move to part 2, which is the parental influences and activities. I know that we touched on things that Ethan reported, the threats of suicide made in front of Ethan. What else did you find that was interesting under this section?
So under this section, Ethan witnessed just a litany of verbal abuse, frequent taunts, and I guess the part that sort of stood out for me was when he told his parents that he was hearing voices and he needed to see a therapist. I don't know what 15-year-old raises his hand and says, "My brain hurts, I need to see a therapist." And it never happened.
What did you find out about the purchase of the gun and then going to the shooting range?
So there seemed to have been discord between his parents. I think his dad bought the gun out of spite. And then his mom took him to the shooting range out of spite because they were arguing. So there was constant just discord and family dysfunction.
And in your interview with Ethan, did he report that he was ever taken to any sort of doctor to deal with this?
In my review of the record, there was no indication that he was ever taken to a doctor.
In your interviews and your discussion with him about the constant situations that were going on, was there constant arguments about divorce and which parent that Ethan would choose?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, can you explain that a little bit?
So yes, there was frequent just harsh discussions about infidelity, suicide, and which parent Ethan needed to choose to live with when they separate or the event that they separate.
Were you able to look at the text messages between Ethan and his friend over the months leading up to November?
I did.
All right, and what's the significance that you found with those text messages?
So in reviewing those text messages, let me just say Ethan had no idea that these text messages were going to be made public. And so he was having private conversations with his friend. And in one of his text messages, which is on the screen, he says that my mom thinks I'm taking drugs, but she doesn't worry about my mental health. In another of the text messages on the screen, he said, I have an effing breakdown in the shower. And in the text messages also, he said, from what my mom said last night, I went outside in my shorts and I have no recollection of that event. And in another text message on your screen, he said to his friend, I am hallucinating. And he said, I hear like people talking to me. These were actual text messages back and forth between himself and his friend.
I want to move next to part 3, which is the Oxford school system. Were you able to take a look at the counseling that was available to Ethan at the school, as well as the reports surrounding the school's interaction with Ethan the day prior and the day of the incident?
Can you repeat that question?
Sure. Were you able to look at Oxford school system and their counseling program, as well as the interaction that the school system had with him the day before, as well as the day of the incident?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And can you explain what you found?
So what I found was that in terms of the available resources for intervention, it did not appear to me from my review of the information that he was afforded any type of mental health assistance.
You also mentioned in your report implicit bias. What is that?
So implicit bias it's sort of like the unconscious forces. You know, I can use an analogy of a peanut butter jar, which is actually on one of their slides. And so a child learns how to use peanut butter from a jar because the child is taught by the parent how to do that. They learn how to unscrew and cork and unscrew the peanut butter jar to get peanut from the peanut butter. So after a while, they learn it so well that they're able to do it unconsciously. The grooves on that bottle represent the grooves that society grooves us with, so that we have certain perception of things and people. Well, that's how implicit bias works. Let me give you another quick example. I was in court in Detroit and about to step into the elevator, and there was an attorney and other people. I was dressed in suit and tie, and the attorney turned to me and said, "Counsel, come on in." I'm not an attorney, but he made the assumption based on how I was dressed and how I comported myself that I was an attorney. Well, that's how implicit bias works. So it's not necessarily a bad thing nor a good thing. It's a thing, but it can have deadly consequences if it's not used appropriately.
Okay. Now, you also stated that you had a chance to look at the resources that were available to any high school student at Oxford High School. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And is there a rubric or is there a standard that is required for a school to have counselors, to have support staff, or to be able to help the students when they have issues?
Certainly. So the American School Counseling Association, known as ASCA, this is sort of like the monitoring body that makes recommendation in terms of social worker to student ratio. So the recommendation is that there be minimum one social worker to about 250 students. And what that body says is that if you have a ratio of one social worker to 1,000 students, you are not even getting into the classroom.
Were you able to find the data, and I know that it's contained in your report, regarding Oxford in the year prior and the year of the incident?
Certainly.
Okay. And Your Honor, just because they're numbers, I ask if it's okay that he refer to his notes, just to get the numbers correct.
Thank you. Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may, sir.
So in the 2019-2020 school year, what was the social worker to student ratio in Oxford?
So it was approximately one social worker to about 1,000 students.
What about 2020 to 2021?
It was 1 to 1 social worker to about 900 students.
And then what about 2021 to 2022?
It was about 1 to about 900 students.
So you went even a step further to look at suspensions and expulsions. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And what were your findings?
So in my research on the Oxford school system, just in terms of raw data, I saw that whites comprised about 80% of the school district's enrollment. And blacks comprise, I think, about just under 5%, and Hispanics about 12%, which is reflective, I believe, of the society. So there was nothing revealing about that. However, when you begin now to disaggregate the data, because data tells you something, so that when you begin to disaggregate it, you see a pattern, which is visible on your screen. So whites, 80% enrollment. And in terms of suspensions, 68% of the students suspended were whites. Blacks, enrollment, 5%. Suspension, 12%. Let's look at expulsions. Again, whites, 80% of the population. Expulsions, 44%, so about half. Blacks, 5% of the population. Expulsions, 22%. Hispanics, I think about 12% of the population. Expulsions, 22%. What this data is telling you is very significant, is that other students are suspended or expelled at a disproportionate rate when considered to the majority population. And then when you dig a little deeper, you have to ask yourself, what are we missing? And as it pertains to Ethan, as you will see, is that the students are not subject to the same degree of rigor, which is why implicit bias is so important.
Okay. And can you explain, just so it's clear, how implicit bias ties into these findings?
Absolutely, because if you believe that a student is not a problem, you are less likely to pay attention to that student. Even if you are shown overwhelming evidence about problems, implicit bias says, you give this person a pass because that's how you've been groomed. You make certain assumptions. So you give certain people a pass based on your assumptions. However, if you give a person a pass who is a problem, it creates a bigger issue.
So I want to go into a little bit of what you call a pass. You were shown a number of assignments that were found in Ethan's backpack, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you would agree with me that, in your honor, these exhibits can be found in Exhibit C.
Thank you.
There is a number of pieces of paper with guns, with bullets, and other alarming scenes drawn on them. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I know the prosecutor made mention that we aren't 100% certain that these were seen by teachers, but they were in his backpack and our school assignments, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you also able to look at emails between the teachers the day before this incident as well as the day of the incident, discussing the things that had come to light from the teachers, trying to give warning to the people in the office?
Yes, ma'am.
And your honor, that's also found in Exhibit C.
Thank you.
And what did those emails show to you, or how do they tie into implicit bias?
So just looking at the emails, I was just red flags went up. It's one teacher who said it's on their screen as an exhibit. And this is from Miss Krapinski. She said, I know Jackie emailed you guys yesterday with some concerns about Ethan Crumbley in our first hour class. Today, he's watching videos on his phone and a guy gunning down people. It looks like it's a movie scene and not security footage, a real event, but definitely still concerning when taking into account some of his behaviors. I continue, and this is from Miss Kubini. I had a student doing first hour. Ethan Crumbley, who was on his phone looking at different bullets at the end of first hour today. As I was walking around the room, passing out their essays, I didn't get a chance to investigate it a bit further since it was at the end of the hour. Now that he's on my radar, I'm also noticing that some of his previous work that he completed from early in the year lean a bit toward the violent side. I can bring these things later today during my 5th prep hour.
And we can tell the time on that email is 9:33 a.m., correct?
Yes, ma'am.
The assignment that Ms. Kubina is talking about, you had a chance to look at, and it's contained as well in my exhibit. It's a note card where a gun was erased, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And there is also a drawing of a person with an arm outstretched with the gun, correct?
That is correct.
So I want to get into the brain and mental illness. You can go to the next one. What is mental illness?
So it's a substantial disorder of thought or mood that significantly impairs judgment, behavior, and the capacity to recognize reality. Mental illness is actually a symptom of a deeper problem. So, for example, if someone has a chest pain is a symptom of a deeper problem. It could be a pulled muscle, or it could be because of a heart attack.
Mhm.
So mental illness is a sign of brain dis-ease.
So there are multiple ways to study the brain, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you briefly discuss those different ways?
Certainly. So one way is to look at the brain directly. So cardiologists look at the heart, dentists look at the teeth, and mental health people should look directly at the brain through various brain imaging techniques which are available. So that's one way. A second way is you want to test the brain directly through psychological instruments. Then a third way is what is utilized by psychiatrists and psychologists, and that is they use symptom clusters. So for example, if someone comes to me and they say, for the last month or so, I've not been sleeping well, I've not been eating well, I've been skipping out on work, I've been crying, I've been sad and blue. Then I go to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM, and I look at symptoms. And if the person has, for example, 5 of these 8 symptoms, then I can diagnose that person like with major depressive disorder. So that's the third way of looking at the brain. And then the last one really is not appropriate, and that is that you guess. So what you do, you say, well, because I see you acting in this way, and because you can plan, and because you can execute, and because you can do these things, I know that you're not ill or don't have a brain dysfunction. That is guessing.
So were you able to actually look at Ethan's brain directly through imaging?
I was not able to.
Okay. So did you then decide to test the brain using assessment tools and perform a number of testing?
Yes, that is correct.
Go to the next one. Can you explain to us the brain and exactly how easy it is for the brain to be damaged in a variety of ways?
Absolutely. So
Judge, I'd just like some foundation. No, I'm sorry, Judge, I'd like some foundation for this area. There's just no evidence in the record that this defendant suffered any brain damage.
Thank you. Please lay more foundation.
Absolutely. Were you able to view a video taken at the 5-1 diner?
yes, I did.
Okay. And in that video, actually, we'll go ahead and play it now
So
since it's
what I would like to
Sure.
emphasize.
1 second. She has to ask a question. Can't interrupt.
sure. So were you able to, in your discussions with Ethan and the evidence that you were presented, were you able to, or did you have some concern that an injury to the brain could have occurred based on what he reported as a child and what you saw in this video?
Yes.
Okay, let's go ahead and play the video. This is my exhibit R. There is no sound in this video. So this is from 2020. What did you observe on this video?
So I observed Ethan walking in the diner, and for some inexplicable reason, his head takes a direct hit to the floor, and observed him trying to get up on his own volition, but he was not able to. And as we know, the brain is very soft. It has the consistency of soft butter or raw egg, and it's housed in this very hard box called the skull that has very sharp ridges. The brain is very susceptible to injury, and I would love to do a demonstration with your permission.
Sure, Your Honor, he has a demonstration to show with an egg as he described how exactly, how soft the brain is and how little it takes to injure the brain. Would the court allow? Hold on.
Second. I'm sorry, someone was just approaching without asking permissions. I'm sorry, what exactly are you trying to do?
Yes, Your Honor, my witness would like to demonstrate to the court how easy it is, as he described, the brain is like a raw egg inside of the skull. He would like to demonstrate to the court how easy it is, even a fall like this, to damage the inside of the brain.
Thank you. People, any objection?
Judge, I guess I just wonder what the basis of that testimony is. It sounds like it's just Dr. King telling us. And the idea that it's the consistency of an egg, I see it in the report without citing anything. So I'd like some foundation that this is not just Dr. King's theory.
Thank you. Respectfully, your argument goes to the weight of this demonstrative evidence, and so the court will apply the appropriate weight. You may approach the witness.
And can you demonstrate, since obviously this is a video courtroom and we're recording, can you demonstrate or discuss what you're going to demonstrate?
Absolutely. So as I previously mentioned.
Sir, you can be seated because I can't see what you're doing.
My apologies, Your Honor. So, as I mentioned, 100 billion neurons and 1 trillion connections in the brain. And this is scientific evidence. This is not my opinion. This is how the human brain is engineered. And it has the consistency of soft butter or raw egg. I've had the opportunity to visit the lab in Loma Linda. I've handled the human brain, and I've seen how the human brain works and how it looks like. This has the consistency of an egg. Ethan is about 6 feet 2 inches tall. And this is not 6 feet 2 inches. This probably is about, I don't know.
Before you move on, sir, please do not, are you going to drop this egg in the courtroom? Thank you. I can't see over.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you. You may proceed, sir.
Now, it makes it difficult for me if I don't stand, Your Honor.
Thank you. You can stand now. I just can't see over this bar here, so I can't see what's below your chest area. So you may stand so that way I can see what you're doing, sir.
So Ethan is 6 feet 2, and this is less than 2 feet. That's the human brain. The reason why our brains don't collapse when we have an injury is because the brain is housed in this hard shell called the skull. This skull protects the brain from external injuries.
So besides the incident that we saw at the 5-1 diner, did he also make you aware of other circumstances where he hit his head or even blacked out?
Yes.
Can you describe that?
Ethan disclosed that he was out with his parents. I think they were picking strawberries or doing something like that. And he fell, and all he remembered was regaining consciousness. And he asked his parents what happened. And they said that he had taken a blow to the head. And there is no indication that he was taken to the emergency room or received medical assistance.
In regards to the 5-1 diner video, you were shown a report where the owner was interviewed. And in fact, his parents told the owner to not call 911 after that fall. Is that your understanding?
Yes, that is correct.
And in your interview with Ethan, did he ever tell you that at some point following that he was taken to the hospital or taken to the doctor to see, 1, why he fell, or 2, what happened from the fall?
I saw no evidence of that.
Let's go to part 4. So we're going to move along to part 4, which is Ethan's testing. Can you explain to the court the tests that you performed with Ethan?
Certainly. So I performed 15 different types of tests. And I wanted to, because there was no opportunity to image his brain, so I wanted to test his brain to see what his brain was like. And so there are a list of 15 tests on the screen and in my report.
Okay, let's go through them. The evaluation of competency to stand trial. Why was this important?
It was important because this is a test that is affirmed by that is recognized, I should say, by the U.S. Supreme Court in Dusky versus the people in 1960. And it essentially looks at 3 things. Does the person have the ability to consult with their attorney? Does the person have the ability to rationally understand the proceedings of the court? Does the person have a factual understanding of the proceedings of the court? And the reason why I administer this test is because I know that sometimes inmates feign or they fake, they try to pretend that something is going on when that is not the case. So when I administer this test, anything below 60 is normal, indicating that Ethan approached this test in an honest and open manner. In other words, he was not feigning. He didn't know the questions that pertain to feigning.
And what were the results?
He does have the ability to consult with his attorney. He does understand the charges against him, and he does have a factual understanding of the charges.
Okay, let's move on to the next test, the mini mental status examination. What is that?
It's a test that has essentially 30 questions, and it tests the person's orientation. My reason for administering this is, again, this is one of the instruments that if someone wants to feign or fake, they can easily do that. For example, some of the questions are, what is the date? What is the day? Where are you? And Ethan answered all of those questions, indicating on that day that he was oriented ×3.
Let's move to the next one. You did a survey of stress symptoms. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you explain your findings?
So on this instrument, on the survey of stress symptoms, Ethan scored 39, indicating high levels of stress. And it was very clear to me that he was approaching it in a very honest, test-taking manner.
And can you just describe some of the symptoms that this test addresses?
Certainly. Anxiety, depression, feeling overwhelmed, loneliness, intrusive thoughts, fatigue. All of those are elements that are present in this test that he endorsed.
Okay. Let's move to the next one, post-traumatic stress checklist for DSM-5. Can you explain what that is?
Sure, it's an instrument that is based on the DSM-5, which is the golden standard of diagnosing mental illness. And so his score of 57 places him in a very high stress category that meets the DSM criteria.
You then did the Beck Depression Inventory. Can you explain that to the court?
Sure, it's an instrument that assesses for depression, sadness, intrusive thoughts, malaise, and his score is 29, which is on the higher level, indicating very high levels of depression.
And again, you're performing these testings at least a year after he has become incarcerated, correct?
That is correct.
Let's look at the next one. It's the Burns Anxiety Inventory. Can you explain to the court what that is?
So that is a measure of one's anxiety, how anxious you are as a person. And as we know, anxiety has a direct effect on the brain. Ethan's score is 53, which is actually in the highest classification of anxiety.
And does that finding of high anxiety fit into all of the other evidence you were looking at? The journal, the text messaging between his friend, and what he self-reported to you?
That's correct.
Let's now look at the brief psychiatric rating scale. Can you explain what that is to the court and what your findings were?
Yeah, so this instrument looks at psychosis. And what is psychosis? Psychosis is a break from reality, as evidenced by auditory hallucinations and visual delusions. And he endorsed several of those items, indicating the presence of psychosis.
Let's now look at the Kaufman Brief Intelligent Test. Can you explain what that is and what your findings were?
Yes, the Kaufman Brief Intelligence Test is administered to test someone's level of intellectual functioning. The reason why I administered this instrument is I wanted to find out why was he failing in school. In my testing, if you have a an intelligent person who's failing in the classroom, it's a signal that there is something going on. And when I administered this test, I saw that his verbal IQ was 104. So average, anything above 85 to about 100, 110 falls in the average range. So he has average verbal IQ, average nonverbal IQ, and overall average intelligence.
You then went on to perform the Wide Range Achievement Test. Can you explain what that is and what your findings were?
Certainly, in the state of Michigan for special education testing, we administer an intelligence test and 2 achievement tests. So I administered a wide range achievement test just to see if I missed anything in terms of his ability to function in their classroom. And except for math, most of his scores were average to high average. Again, that's how we know that there's something else going on with someone who has average intelligence.
Let's move on to the Weschler Individual Achievement Test. Can you explain what that is and what your findings were?
So that is the second of the 2 achievement tests, the RAT and the Wyatt. Again, it's just to sort of double check your results. And again, the scores are consistent with someone who has the ability academically to function in the classroom, but wasn't.
Then finally, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. What is that and what were your results?
So that is the MMPI is for, and this one is for adolescents. It's regarded as the dean of tests to determine mental illness. This test has been validated across various measures, and it's a test that psychologists use. On the table to the left, his PSY score. His score is 801. Anything over 60 means that the person has a number of those symptoms
Of mental illness.
of mental illness.
Mhm.
So his score is 81, indicating someone who has high degrees of paranoia and hallucinations. And then on the right, which is even more troubling, the table on the right, he has elevations above 60 in 2 key measures. One is OCD, obsessive compulsive, and anxiety. And I would love to explain what I mean by that.
If you could explain obsessive compulsive to the court.
So there is a part of the brain called the cingulate gyrus. It runs from the front of the brain to the back of the brain. That is the brain gear shifter. It allows us to shift from one thing to the next. In Ethan's case, someone who scores highly on this measure, what it tells me that this person does not have the ability to shut off those thoughts. It's like being stuck on. So you're with these thoughts every single day, every single night. And we see that with people who have OCD. He also has very high levels of anxiety, and those two tend to hang together. And as you notice in his journal, you notice that repetition, that the voices don't stop. My brain is on fire. Well, when I tested his brain, it's very consistent with what he was writing.
Okay. Does the obsessive compulsive disorder explain the constant searches on internet to look at violent things or to research things or any type of preparation and planning?
Yes, ma'am.
So let's move to the summary of the testing results that you performed. Do you believe that Ethan is a highly intelligent person?
I do.
Do you believe that he suffers from debilitating anxiety?
I do.
Do you believe that he is and was severely depressed?
I do.
Do you believe that he has features of obsessive compulsive disorder?
I do.
Were you able to determine that he was failing at school when, as you stated, he shouldn't have been?
I did.
And what exactly is your diagnosis for Ethan Crumbley?
So major depressive disorder, in addition to psychosis, as evidenced by his verbalizing of hearing voices and seeing things. And by the way, about 12.5% of people with major depression experience major depression with psychosis.
Okay. You have now had an opportunity after turning in your report to review the records from Dr. Kadir. She is the physician from the Easter Seals. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Would you agree with me that you have similar findings, but not exactly the same?
That is correct.
Do you have an explanation for that?
Yeah, that is not unusual. Diagnosing mental illness is not an exact science, so you go based on symptoms. So Dr. Kadir, based on my review of her notation, diagnosed him with, I think, major depressive disorder and I think an adjustment disorder going off
With anxiety.
With anxiety, which is not unusual. But I believe as she continues, if she continues to treat him, once he has the depression and anxiety under control, if he's still verbalizing, hearing voices and seeing things, then she may add that diagnosis. So it's not inconsistent.
Add the diagnosis of psychosis or something else?
Correct.
Okay. So you have told us from your results that Ethan is of average, if not above average intelligence, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So shouldn't he have known better? Shouldn't he have not done this because he's a smart kid?
So unfortunately, intelligence, and this is critical, intelligence does not protect someone from mental illness. So being very intelligent doesn't mean that you cannot be mentally ill.
Do you have any real world examples?
I do. Robin Williams, very intelligent Hollywood actor, but he was mentally ill. How do I know that? Well, he killed himself. He committed suicide. Which we've seen that publicly, a very talented man on Ellen DeGeneres' show, extremely talented. I actually watched a video of him the day before he killed himself. He was dancing with his wife and daughter. And then the next day he drove to a hotel and killed himself. Mental illness is real.
Were you able to watch any videos that were provided to you from body cam footage of Ethan at the jail?
I did.
Your Honor, I'm going to play what is in my exhibits as S body cam jail footage. There are a few videos, but we have shortened them. This is sound, so I don't know if we can have your staff just make sure the sound is perfect. Move to the next one.
We don't stop the water. I don't see stop. Please stop. Please stop. Please stop. Please stop. Why did you stop it, God? Why did you stop it? Why did you stop it, God? Why did you stop it? Why did you stop it? You let it out. Why? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, please, God. I'm sorry. Please, God, no. I'm sorry, God. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, God. Oh. Favor, God, why did you stop it? You didn't stop it, God, but you didn't stop it. And now it's dead me. It's always. Stop it. God, stop it, please. Stop it, God. Stop, stop, God, God, stop. God, stop, please, God. Stop it, please. I this. I didn't stop it. Yes, you didn't stop it. Stop it. You didn't 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 stop it. Way back where the it's so God, we love it. It is so, 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 it is so. You really thought it's something. You don't stop. Oh God, it's you don't stop. Oh yeah, you didn't stop it. Tell me. Oh, I didn't stop it. I didn't stop it. All right. Yeah. I count three again. Sit down. 1, 2, 3. You don't stop the why they just stop it. Why did you stop it? Fine. Why did you stop it? Why don't you stop it? Please stop it. Stop it, please stop it. Please stop it. Please stop it. Please stop it. Why did you stop it? God, lost me. Why did you stop it? Why did you stop it, God? Why did you stop it? Why did you stop it? You let it out.
All right. Doctor, what did we just witness?
So we witness a child in the throes of psychosis. Or we just witnessed someone who's saying, God, why didn't you stop it? And that's exactly how psychosis works. You
Wait.
engage in an action and somehow you don't understand the outcome of the consequences. He's having a panic attack and a break with reality.
We also hear him saying you could have saved her.
That is correct.
In a part of the video, you see Ethan being violent.
No, ma'am.
Are mental health issues perfect? I mean, he's obviously been on medication now for a period of time, and things like this obviously can still happen. What is your explanation to that?
So medications are not an exact science. There's different levels of titration. There are times when some medications work, and there are times when they don't always work, just like in the physical realm.
I want to move on to part 5. So you were able to look at the events leading up to the shooting, correct?
That is correct.
All right. Did Ethan disclose to you a situation where he actually brought casings to school and displayed them on his desk?
He did.
Can you explain that?
Certainly, he indicated to me that he brought one live round. And actually, in my review of the records and with the detectives that interviewed some of the students, one of the students did confirm that Ethan showed him a live round and shell casing. So I have no reasons to doubt what he said, that he placed some shell casings on the desk in his class. And the teacher walked by, didn't name the teacher. And I said to him multiple times, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Yes."
You were made aware and you were able to see some interviews about the events of November 30th in the counseling office, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And it was your understanding that he was caught looking at websites dealing with ammunition?
That is correct.
Were you able to look at the actual school assignment that was the cause of him being taken to the office that morning, where he wrote certain things and drew certain things?
That is correct.
Were you also able to discuss with Ethan the video that the court has been shown that was filmed the night before?
Yes, ma'am.
And you've had an opportunity to review that video?
I have.
Can you explain that video or give it some context?
So this was a night before the shooting when Ethan recorded himself, appeared to have been using a cell phone in terms of what he was planning to do the following day. And doing certain parts of the video, he made references to demons. And then in the video, he said, "I am the demon." It just indicates the fragmentation in his head in terms of what was happening.
And what was your understanding about why he was outside at that point in time? What did he tell you had gone on in the home leading up to him being outside?
I think his parents had locked him out of the house, and they had taken some money from him.
Okay. And was that in relation to grades?
Yes, because he was failing some of his classes.
And how did he feel about that?
Terrible, in terms of how they were treating him.
The video that the court has viewed, and I know you have viewed, it seems just like a rambling of thoughts.
That is correct. Just sort of scrambled thoughts.
And do you believe that that is part of what mental illness can do to you?
Yes, ma'am.
let's talk about the actual day of the shooting. Did Ethan ever tell you if he had been asked if he had a gun by any school professionals or the parents that day at school?
No,
And is it your understanding from speaking to Ethan that he was allowed to stay in school that day?
yes, he was allowed to stay in school.
And can you explain the situation involving his backpack or how he explained it to you?
So this is how he explained it to me after he was called down to the office. He left his backpack in the classroom. And then he indicated that, I think it was Ejak. I could be butchering his name. I do apologize for that. Went to retrieve his backpack. And Ethan said, for the first time in his life, he felt relieved. He said he just knew that the sheriffs were going to burst into the office and arrest him because there was no way, after all that they saw, that they were not going to search that backpack. In fact, this is a comment he made that has stuck with me. He said one of the Hispanic students was suspected of using drugs. And he remembered them searching that kid's locker. And he felt fairly sure that they were going to search his backpack. When Ejak brought the backpack into the office, he made a comment. He said, "This is heavy. What do you have in here? Bricks?" And then Ethan said, all he had to do was just unzip that backpack, but he didn't.
To the best of your knowledge, after speaking with Ethan and reviewing all of the records, the backpack was not searched, correct?
It was not searched.
So obviously at that point, Ethan had the opportunity to volunteer the information that he had a weapon in his bag. Would you agree with me?
That is correct.
Can you explain why you believe that did not happen?
He was in a state of ambivalence. Do I tell? Do I not tell? Do I do this? Do I not do this? What is going to happen if I tell? So that is the state of flux that he was in.
So I want to kind of put it all together for the court. So you've told us about a complex childhood full of trauma, correct?
That is correct.
Violence in the home,
That is correct.
mental illness,
That is correct.
a lack of resources, no one's getting him the counseling that he needs,
That is correct.
neglect,
That is correct.
access to weapons,
That is correct.
in a school system with not enough counselors.
That
And
is
where did
correct.
that lead us?
Tragedy.
I want to move on to part 6. I know you've touched on quite a bit of this already. There's been testimony and there's been some argument about Ethan looking up or talking about going to prison. Is it normal that a 15-year-old would just be okay with the fact that he's going to do something that lands him in prison?
So teenagers go through a phase that is called personal fail. And if I may give you an example. Sure. A teenager may be driving 100 yards away, the light is about to turn red. They think that they can magically beat that red light and nothing bad is going to happen to them. It's because their brain, their prefrontal cortex, this is the brain supervisor, is not fully developed. Just biologically and physiologically, the human brain, the prefrontal cortex, is not developed until about age 24, 25. In Ethan's case, he has what is called arrested development.
Can you explain what that is?
Absolutely. So chronologically, he may have been 15 at the time, but given the high levels of stress and complex trauma, his age was much younger than his chronological age.
You've been able to see through the text messages and actually in your interviews with Ethan, he reported that he was not sleeping and he was not eating. How does that tie into mental illness?
So the brain consumes about 20 to 30% of the calories that we consume. So whatever we consume, the brain consumes about 20 to 30% of that. So sleep deprivation and lack of appropriate nutrition greatly impact the body. Our bodies were not meant to be in a state of high anxiety perpetually.
You've also been able to take a look at the Google searches that he was doing. And a lot of them are looking kind of for self-diagnosis, looking up what is depression? Do I have ADHD? Do I have obsessive compulsive disorder? What do you make of that?
So here is a child who was just trying to make sense of his inner world. He couldn't get help from his parents, from the home system, couldn't get help from the school system. He couldn't get to a doctor. He couldn't get to a counselor. So his last resort was to try to figure out what's happening to me. Is this normal? Am I depressed? Am I anxious? Am I a sociopath? Who am I? He's trying to make sense of what's going on within him.
You've also been shown a number of searches that were done on a particular website where very violent videos, actual murders, actual shootings are categorized and people can view them. What is your understanding of what that does, especially to an adolescent's brain?
So during adolescence, the person's brain is still in the formative stage. The neurons are still trying to connect. And if one spends an inordinate amount of time ingesting that type of content without supervision, before long, it's natural to lose sight of what is real and what is not real.
Now, you've been made aware that there was a situation at the jail with a password and a tablet, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And can you explain what you believe to have happened in this situation?
Certainly. So Ethan was given a tablet, and because he's a fairly intelligent person, he was able to figure out the password and was able to go on the internet and use his tablet. And what he indicated to me is that although he had the urge to go to the live gore site, he was able to restrain himself, which he's pretty proud of. 2 weeks, just did not go to the site, but he eventually went there.
And what does that, can you give that a context? What does that mean to you? Is he regressing? What, can you give an explanation to that?
So when you make a comparison of what he was doing prior, he was ingesting that content constantly, every day, hours and hours at a time. And in my mind, it shows progress, not perfection, but progress.
Were you able to view the videos of Ethan killing baby birds?
I did.
Can you discuss the significance of that and what you think and how you think it fits into this case and his diagnosis?
Absolutely. I observed Ethan torturing baby birds. He wanted them to feel the pain that he was feeling inside. And I observed his persona. He was actually speaking to them in a different tone of voice, almost as a parent talking to a child. It's just a reflection of his mental impairment.
Okay. What about, he talks about a desire to kill, or he wants to find another set of baby birds so that he can kill them. Can you explain that?
It sort of lines up with my testing of his brain. I indicated that his obsessive compulsive scales, I think his score is 8-1, indicating that this part of the brain, the cingulate gyrus, is on fire, meaning that it's hard to turn it off, and without appropriate intervention, without treatment and medications, that part of the brain is stuck on.
What about the fact that when the police come in, Ethan surrenders, and then in the police car acts normal? I mean, he's not talking to voices, he's not flailing about. Can you explain that?
Certainly, it's a phase called tension reduction. So tension is something that is built up. Anxiety, obsession, anxiety, obsession. I guess a good analogy is to think in terms of like a pressure cooker. It's on the stove and it's boiling, and there's tension building up in there. And the one way for that tension to go away is when you release that knob, the tension goes out and you revert to equilibrium. So tension reduction cycle.
So is your explanation then, once he carried out this plan that he was so fixated on, he had that sense of reduction or accomplishment?
Absolutely, it's analogous to what we just witnessed. So the person in the videos is the same person in the courtroom. There's no difference. It is the same person.
I want to talk about the report that you authored. Obviously, in giving the history that you did, you've been doing these regular types of analysis outside of the courtroom for many years. You would agree with me?
That is correct.
Okay. So how is it that you came to start doing the work that you're doing now for Miller hearings?
So I think it was around 2019, an attorney reached out to me and asked me if I would do one of the Miller hearings.
Mhm.
And I was fairly confident in my ability as a psychologist, in my ability to clinically interview someone, in my ability to test someone. But in terms of crafting a legal report, I was a neophyte. It was not my area of expertise. And so I reached out to the attorney and said that if I'm to do this report, I'm going to need you to reach out to your sources, obtain copies of their report, make sure you get their permission, because I plan to use the rubric and extract some of the legal language in my report. And that is 2019 to 25 clients ago. And that is the exact format that I've been using.
And that's what you did in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you able to form an opinion whether or not Ethan Crumbley was mentally ill on November 30th of 2021?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that?
He has major depressive disorder with psychosis, anxiety, and features of obsessive compulsive disorder. He is mentally ill.
And in all the testing that you did and the interviews, do you believe that there is the possibility of rehabilitation?
I do,
And can you explain that?
certainly. As I indicated, I have worked in the field of brain injury for 25 years. I take pride in my work. I've treated people with stroke, CVA. I've treated people with anoxic brain injury, and I've treated people with mental health. And along with my team, we have been able to rehabilitate people. A number of my clients have had issues with the law, and through psychotherapy and support, they've made progress. Additionally, and this is important, in neuroscience, there is something called neuroplasticity. And that is the ability of the brain to create new pathways, to generate new neurons. You see this in stroke victims. It's a stroke on the left-hand side, is right-hand side neglect. Well, those are the people that I have worked with and taught them how to speak again and how to walk again and how to function. So absolutely, yes.
So people with mental illness, especially ones that do something, extremely serious that leads them down a path that they find themselves in prison. I know Dr. Keating touched on this a little bit, but you believe that, especially based on Ethan's age, that his brain can rewire and he can stop the behaviors that he was exhibiting previously. Is that correct?
That is correct. Ethan's brain is still maturing, and his brain probably will not reach full maturity for another 10 years.
Are the clinical opinions in your report based solely on the testing and your interaction with Ethan Crumbley that you yourself performed?
So my conclusions are based on my clinical interview of Ethan Crumbley and are based on the results from my testing.
I have no further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cross.
Your Honor, the doctors actually testified to a whole lot of things that are not in his report, and we take a short break before cross-examination.
Sure. We'll go ahead and take about a 10-minute break. Deputies, if you could, go ahead and take the defendant back downstairs. To those in the gallery, please be seated until the defendant has exited the courtroom. Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
We will stand in recess for approximately 10-15 minutes. Court stands in recess.
All right. Have you some business?
Your Honor, calling people versus Ethan Crumbley, case number 279-506, FC.
Thank you. Appearances for the record.
Karen McDonald on behalf of the people.
Thank you, Marquise, on behalf of people.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. David Williams on behalf of the people.
Call up Michelle Lofton on behalf of Ethan Crumbley.
Amy Half on behalf of Ethan Crumbley. Generation Healthy on behalf of Ethan Crumbley.
Thank you. You all may be seated and good morning again. Dr. King, if he's still in the courtroom. Dr. King, you may retake the stand, sir. Sir, you may be seated. You are still under oath. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you. People cross.
Good morning, Dr. King.
Good morning, sir.
Dr. King, you're here because your job is to help the defense establish mitigating factors for this defendant, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're familiar with the Miller factors.
Yes, sir.
And in fact, you note that on the first page of your report, the defendant was referred to you for an evaluation focused particularly on the sentencing factors outlined in Miller versus Alabama, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then you say that the Miller factors and mental illness, you say supports a sentence of other than life without parole, true?
Yes, sir.
You know, the Miller factors are incorporated into Michigan law. Are you aware of that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And can you tell us what the 5 factors are?
So, immaturity, age, person has to be younger than 18, impetuosity, transient recklessness, and ability to extricate oneself from a dysfunctional family.
Anything else, doctor?
I probably missed a couple. I didn't memorize them.
Okay, so doctor, in fact, under the law, there are 5 factors. First is chronological age, hallmark features among them, immaturity, impetuosity, failure to appreciate risks and consequences. Does that sound right?
That's about right.
So most of what you described goes to that first factor. The second is the juvenile's family and home environment. And you talked about that, the inability to overcome his circumstances, right?
Yes, sir.
There are 3 other factors: the circumstance of the homicide offense, the incompetencies of youth, which affect how the juvenile might have been charged or convicted of a lesser crime, and the possibility of rehabilitation, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Doctor, when were you retained in this case?
I think I was contacted on or around, and my timeline could be off. I want to say in November, it was just around Thanksgiving of 22, I believe. Again, my timeline could be off.
And you were provided some materials to review,
Yes, sir.
and then you interviewed the defendant.
I did.
Over how many sessions?
I believe over 6 sessions.
And can you tell us when those were?
Sorry, I did not memorize the date. I think the first time I met the defendant would have been around January 4th or 5th. I think that is the first time I interviewed him. I interviewed him twice virtually, and maybe 3 or 4 times after. The last time I interviewed him was probably July, I think 10th or 11th. I don't have the access to my calendar, so I didn't memorize those dates.
Hey, Doctor, what do you have with you today?
Before you move on, the first meeting you said that was on January 4th or January 5th, was that of 2023?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And then your last meeting, of course, would have been in 2023 as well, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you. Doctor, what do you have with you today?
I have my PowerPoint, and I have a copy of the presentation. I have my iPad. I have a model of the brain. And I have a copy of my CV, and I have a copy of my report that is highlighted.
Doctor, do you have your calendar in your iPad? Would you be able to give us the dates of those interviews?
No, my calendar, sir, is on my phone.
And you don't have that with you today?
Yes, sir.
Okay, could you take out your report, please?
For the record, his report is also in Dependents N, is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Thank you.
So, Dr. King, you have your report in front of you?
I do.
And so we're clear, that's your report dated June 16th, 2023, and you signed it on page 69, correct?
I do.
All right. If you turn to page 3, Doctor, does that help refresh your recollection regarding any of the dates that you interviewed the defendant?
I do.
Okay, so was your first meeting with him on December 15th of 2022?
That is correct.
And you conducted a structured interview on January 5th, 2023?
That is correct.
And you did an evaluation of competency to stand trial on January 11th of 2023?
That is correct.
And as to the other 3 dates, you're not able to give us those today?
Yes, that is correct.
And Doctor, you did some testing and then you did some research yourself, correct?
That is correct.
Doctor, in the timeline that was in the presentation that was put up on the screen, it didn't include the dates of your reports. You prepared 2 reports, correct?
I prepared an initial report because if my memory serves me correctly, this hearing was supposed to have been held, I think, early in May.
May 1st.
May 1st. And then I was told that there was an adjournment and so here we are today.
Right. Okay. So, but in your timeline, it didn't include the dates of the reports. And in fact, the first report came partway through that timeline. Would you agree? And then the last report came in June.
That sounds about right, sir.
So, Doctor, on page 3 of your report, again, we're talking about your June report. You referred to it on page 2 as a complete list of records relied on and reviewed, correct?
What page is
On page 2, you reference in the first paragraph, partway down, a complete list of records reviewed and relied on is listed beginning on page 3 of this report.
I see that.
Okay. And then you see on page 3 of your report, you list a number of things, correct?
That is correct, sir.
Dr. King, you testified to a number of things on direct that don't appear in that list. Can you tell us what those are? What other things that aren't on this list you reviewed and considered?
So, for instance, Dr. Kadir's report from Easter Seals, which was comprised of 1,310 pages. I believe I only got those, I think, last week.
Okay.
Ms. Lofton, of course, has sent me updated information. I apologize, I've not been able to memorize information. We're talking about voluminous pages of information.
Okay, so what I want to know about, Doctor, is things that you had at the time of your June 16th report that you did not list. So, for example, you said in your direct testimony that you interviewed a neighbor. You recall testifying to that?
Yes.
And that's not listed in your sources of information, is it?
That is not listed here. I do not see it here.
Okay, in fact, when did you conduct that interview?
Probably it was about, I think about 2 months ago, and again, my timeline could be off. I don't have my calendar in front of me, sir, so I'm not able to give you that exact date.
Doctor, you made no reference to that in your report, did you?
It's not in my sources of available information.
Is it referenced anywhere in your report?
I don't see the reference here, sir.
Okay, but I'm not, there are a bunch of things you referenced that aren't listed in your sources, and we'll talk about that. What I'm asking you is, did you make reference to your interview with the neighbor anywhere in your report? Is there any way I would have known that about that before today?
Yes, so, can I explain?
Please.
So you have, sir, a copy of my PowerPoint.
No, sir, I don't.
I apologize for that.
So it's not mentioned in your report. Did you document that interview with the neighbor in any way?
I did.
And do you have that documentation with you today?
It's not in my report, sir.
Okay, thank you. Do you have documentation of that anywhere? Do you have notes? Did you write a short report? Did you report that to council? Do you have anything that reflects your interview with the neighbor?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you have that with you today?
I do not.
Doctor, you also referenced text messages between the parents, right?
Yes, sir.
And that's not listed in your source of information either, is it?
It is not listed.
And you don't reference that in the report, do you?
That is correct.
Doctor, you testified about reviewing the defendant's internet searches, correct?
That is correct.
And in fact, you mentioned something about researching something about a dog, right? About burying the dog.
That is correct.
Okay. You talk about he's got to go out to the shed and bury the dog, right?
That is correct.
And
sir.
he was researching how to do that.
That is correct.
And that's the same shed where he tortured the baby birds, correct?
I don't know that to be a fact, but if you say that is the case, I don't know that to be a fact.
So doctor, you have something that no one else in this courtroom had. You had access to all the information you wanted and you got to interview the defendant. Did you not ask the defendant about where that torture took place?
The torture of,
The birds.
I think he said it took place in the shed. I don't know if there's, multiple sheds. I've never been to the home, sir, so I honestly don't know.
So doctor, I just asked you about the torture and then you said the torture of what? Are you aware of torture of anything other than birds?
I just wanted to have clarification from you, sir, just before I answer the question.
That's fine. Are you aware of any other torture committed by the defendant?
Besides the birds, I don't think so. Or at least I don't recall of any other.
Doctor, you also mentioned that you reviewed text messages over a period of months between the defendant and his friend B. Is that right? Is that your testimony?
Yes, sir.
In your report, doctor, you reference a subset of those, right?
You have a page for me?
So doctor, you can do two things. One is, why don't we look at page 3, the 5th bullet point up from the bottom, and you list the series of dates. Text messages obtained by Paulette Lofton between the defendant and his friend B dated April 5th, 2021 to April 7th of 2021, right?
Okay,
But you're telling the court you in fact reviewed a lot more text than that. You just don't reference them in your sources, correct?
that is true.
Okay. And then doctor, on pages 8 through 22 through 21, you include a series of text messages. You know about how many those are?
How many text messages?
Yeah, that you include in your report.
Oh.
If I say roughly 200, I don't need an exact number. Does that sound about right?
I would not disagree with you.
Okay. And doctor, you'd agree with me, those text messages that you specifically paste into your report are all from one day, April 5th of 2021.
As far as I can see, sir, yes.
Doctor, you looked at some emails, and then you looked at something, an assignment from Mrs. Kubina that you referenced. those also are not listed in your source of information, are they?
They're not.
But you did review them and consider those.
I did.
Then Dr. Aniker's report is listed in your sources, correct?
That is correct, sir.
And you reviewed that entire report, correct?
The report of Dr. Aniker?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you considered that in your analysis. It was part of your review and your conclusion. Is that correct?
I did.
So, Doctor, we talked about the text message you reviewed. You also reviewed some videos, correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what videos did you review?
I reviewed the videos of the actual shooting. I reviewed the videos of the bird. And the video of Ethan taking a fall in the diner. And I believe 4 or 5 other videos from the Oakland County Jail.
Okay, and Doctor, do you also review the video that the defendant took the night before the shooting?
Yes, I did.
Doctor, regarding the diner video, when I watch it, it doesn't seem you can see in the video whether the defendant hits his head or not. Were you able to see that in the video, or did you get that from the defendant?
Can you rephrase that question, please, sir?
When I watched the video from the diner, I actually didn't see the defendant hit his head. Maybe I missed it, but are you saying you can see that in the video, or that's what the defendant told you?
I'm wondering if you missed it, sir, because based on my review of it, that is what appeared to have happened, and he was helped up, and then he fell again and had to be helped up. That's how I saw it.
We talked about 2 reports, Doctor, and the first report is dated January 27th of 2023. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Doctor, I'm showing what's been marked as People's Proposed Exhibit 63. Can you take a look at that?
One moment, please, sir.
Doctor, I'll go through that with you a little bit, but does that look like your previous report?
It does. I do have an updated report, June 16. So these two, this is an updated of what I did initially.
Correct. So I received 2 copies of your report. The first one is the one you're looking at now, Exhibit 63, and the other is the June 16th report. And that sounds right to you. You did 2 reports.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you agree this is the first one?
Yeah, so I'm a little confused because I'm under the impression that the June 16 report supersedes the January 7 report because the June 16 report has information that I didn't have when I did the January report.
Okay, that's important, Doctor. It's information you didn't have, and we're going to talk about that. All right, Doctor, are there differences between the two reports?
Yes, sir, there are differences.
Can you tell me what those are? You know, Doctor, I want to step back for 1 second. Let me withdraw that question. We'll come back to that. Do you know when that report was finalized? Because it's dated January 27th, 2023. I didn't receive it until April. Do you know when you finalized that version?
So I'm not able to keep that timeline in my head. I apologize that I can't memorize the timeline when the report was completed, sir.
So, Doctor, I'm not worried about memorizing the timeline. I'm just asking if you know about when this. So you agree you were going to testify on about May 1st for the Miller hearing when it was originally scheduled, correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
So did you complete your first report in January, a few months before the Miller hearing, or did you finish it in April or sometime in between?
I know it was completed before May 1st, but exactly when, I don't know, sir.
Okay, a couple weeks before?
Okay,
Okay, so when you submitted that report at that time, you thought that was your final report and you were gonna come to court and testify on May 1st with that report, correct?
that was my understanding, sir.
And at that point, you've been retained since you think November, right?
I was contacted in November. And I believe I was retained shortly after.
Okay, and you know you were retained by December 15th because you were meeting with the defendant by then, correct?
Yes, sir.
And at that point, doctor, had you been given access to everything you needed or you wanted to see for your report?
I was given access to information. I don't know that I was given access to everything because obviously since then, I've been given additional information.
Okay. And at that point, doctor, if you look at your first or the partial paragraph at the bottom of page 1 of the January report, said you'd spent 16 hours interviewing the defendant, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and then after you submitted that report, this hearing was adjourned, right?
That is correct.
And then you spent about another 6 hours with the defendant. In your June report, it says you've spent now 22 hours. Does that sound right?
That sounds about right.
All right, doctor, I asked you about the differences in the report. Can you go over those with me?
Are you asking me to tell you the differences in these two reports?
Yes, yes. Doctor.
I'm not sure if you want me to go through page by page. So their first report has 6 to 9 pages. And I think my
Your second report also has 69 pages, doctor.
6 to 9 pages. So what parts do you want me to go through, sir?
I'd like to know what you changed between the January report and the June report. All right, so doctor, as you sit here right now, you're not able to quickly tell me what changed.
Yeah, we're looking at almost 70 pages or single spaced. It will take me a long time to compare these two reports and go through line by line by line.
Would you agree, doctor, there are not a lot of differences? Would you agree with me?
I am not able to answer that question, sir, because I don't know the answer.
Okay, but they're both your reports, doctor, and you had an additional couple of months when the hearing was adjourned to prepare another report, right?
Yes, sir.
And you're saying you don't remember what you did in addition to your first report to come to your second report.
What I am saying is that between May, for instance, between May and July, I have met with Ethan Crumbley.
Spend another 6 hours with him, right? So doctor, look at
Before we move on, did you meet with him for 6 hours through May and July?
Approximately.
Thank you. You may continue.
So doctor, I want you to look at page 1 of your June report, and I want you to look at the second sentence. Starts on December 1st, 2021. The defendant was booked at the Oakland County Jail after bringing a 9mm handgun to Oxford High School, where he allegedly shot and killed 4 of his classmates. Do you see that?
Are you reading from the January report?
June report, doctor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Yes, I want you to look at the June report and see that you said that the defendant allegedly shot and killed 4 of his classmates in June. You see that?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, in your January report, you don't say allegedly. Can you tell the court why you changed it to say that he allegedly killed 4 students?
I don't know why that was changed, sir.
No one has ever told you that this defendant did not kill those 4 students, correct?
That is correct.
You know that he did it, but for some reason you made a change to say that he allegedly did it, but you don't know why.
That is correct, sir.
All right, doctor, I'm looking, now we're gonna go back to the January report. I want to look at page 3 of the January report, and I want to look at the items you considered. Your sources of available information. We're in the January report. I'm looking at the last bullet point. Judge, I'm sorry, I don't know if I gave you a copy of People's Proposed Exhibit 63. May I do that?
Yes, are you moving to admit it at this time before the
Yes,
court
sure.
reviews it? Any objection?
No objection.
Thank you. Plaintiff 63 is admitted. You may approach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so doctor, we're looking at the last bullet point on Exhibit 63, the January report, and the last bullet point. Can you read that to us?
On the January 27th bell, that is dated January 27th. The last bullet point says Oakland County's Prosecutor's Office video footage.
Correct. And you list 3 videos, correct?
I do.
And what are those?
It's the Oxford High School video of 11/30/2021 shooting. Third video recorded by Ethan. And then I have manifesto recorded by Ethan.
Right, doctor, now I'd like you to turn to page 3 of your June report.
I'm looking at the June report.
Okay, and the last bullet point, what does the last bullet point in the June report say?
Says Oakland County deputies body camera footage.
And in that regard, you're talking about the body camera footage from the jail that we saw on the screen, correct?
Okay, I think so.
Okay, he's wearing the spit hood over his head and they've got him in a chair. He's upset.
That is correct.
All right. So, doctor, you did in fact view the Oxford High School video of the November 30th, 2021 shooting, the bird video recorded by Ethan, and the manifesto video recorded by Ethan, right? You had access to those and you reviewed those, correct? Correct.
That is correct.
And then you just took them out of your June report.
I don't know that I took them out.
Doctor, you're welcome to as much time as you want, but if you look at that list on page 3, those videos are not referenced.
Yes, they're not listed here.
Okay, so you took them out, and my question to you is why?
Sir, they're not listed here.
And my question to you, doctor, is why aren't they listed? Why did you take them out between your 2 reports?
I'm not sure why.
But you agree with me, you watched those before your January report.
Can you repeat the question, please?
You watched those videos before you submitted your January report. So when you listed them in your sources in your January report, you had in fact reviewed them.
That is correct.
Doctor, on page 49 of your June report. So page 49 of your June report under events leading up to the shooting, do you see that?
Yes, sir.
And you referenced the journal that the defendant kept. Do you see that?
Page 49.
Yes. The first line under events leading up to the shooting.
Yes, sir.
When did you review the journal?
What date?
Yes,
I don't have the date in front of me, sir.
but when did you receive it from counsel?
I don't have that exact date in front of me, sir. I do not know the date.
I want to jump ahead to page 68 of your January report. When I look at conclusion events. Then we're on page 68. Do you see that?
One moment, sir. Yes.
Doctor, the last sentence, I'm sorry. The second to last sentence under conclusion event says surveillance video shows the defendant sitting on the ground crying, fully well knowing that he is on a path of no return. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
That's not in your June report, is it? It's page 68 of your June report. It's at the top. It's conclusion events, and that sentence is taken out, isn't it?
On the June report,
Correct.
it says surveillance video shows Ethan sitting on the ground crying, fully well knowing that he's on a path of no return.
That's in your January report, correct?
That is correct.
But not in your June report, correct?
I actually just read that from my June report.
And doctor, you and I have two different reports. Can I see what you're looking at, doctor?
Certainly.
May approach the witness.
Your Honor, may I approach and provide my client with a copy of the report that is contained in my exhibit? I don't know if the report that he's referencing is another edit that was done, but I have the copy that was submitted to the people and that was submitted to the court. He was not provided that copy today, so I don't know if he's looking at another version.
Thank
And
you.
I'll just indicate for the record, Your Honor, he showed me a report that's dated June 16th, but the language is not the same.
Thank you. Are there multiple copies of the June report?
Your Honor, this was a working document, and I know Dr. King can explain that. Obviously, since the first report, which was turned over to the people in April, a number of things have transpired, and he has continued to work and continue to edit his report so that the report that the court has today is the most accurate report. So if I could approach with the exhibit that was turned over to the people as well as the court to make sure that we are all looking at the exact same version of this report that is ever changing.
Thank you. He should only have the report before him that has been admitted into evidence. And so whatever's been admitted into evidence, doctor, that's the only report that you are to be testifying to. Please don't testify to reports that have not been admitted into evidence because it causes confusion. You may approach the witness and give him the exhibit that has been admitted into evidence.
Thank you.
Thank you. And what's the date of this
It is
exhibit?
the June 16th report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
People, you may proceed.
Thank you. Your Honor, may I approach? I'd like to see what he brought to try and understand why there are two reports with the same date and different data. May I approach?
You may.
May I also approach?
Yes, absolutely. And counsel could take a moment to compare.
Want me to take it out?
That's
You take it out, please.
Yeah, that's the one that was submitted and was used as an exhibit. Thank you.
All right, so first, Dr. King, I want to make sure we've cleared this up. So you came to court today and brought a third version of your report that is in fact dated June 16th, but is not the final version. Is that correct?
So as attorney explained, this has been a work in progress that I've emailed and sent over and updated. So there seems to be some confusion as to which one is current. I've been handed a copy of what I think has been admitted into evidence. And that's the one I'm referencing.
All right, and now, Doctor, I'm going to bring back to you the one that you brought with you to court today. And what I'd like you to do is now turn to the report that's been admitted as an exhibit. The June 16th report that's in evidence.
Okay.
And if you flip to page 68. Okay. And if you look at conclusion events, you see that this sentence I referenced in your January 27th, 2023 report, and that's still in the report you brought with you, is in fact not in the report that was provided to me, and that's in evidence today. You see that?
That is correct.
Doctor, where did that come from? The statement that surveillance video shows the defendant sitting on the ground crying, fully well knowing that he's on a path of no return. Where did you get that?
I had an opportunity to view the video of him sitting in the lunchroom, the cafeteria.
So, doctor, that's your interpretation of a video of the defendant. You say he's crying.
Okay,
There's no audio.
there's no audio.
Did you ask the defendant about that?
I did not.
All right. So, doctor, between the first report and the second report, we're going to say you got about 2 months more to time to work on it, correct?
That is correct.
And based on everything you reviewed and your discussions with the defendant and with his defense team, you identified all of the mitigating information you could find, correct?
That is correct.
And you included the mitigating information you found in your report, correct?
That is correct.
And in fact, that was the whole point. That's why you're retained, is to find as much mitigation as you could and then present that to the court in a report and then come testify about it, right?
That is correct.
And doctor, you were given sufficient time to meet with the defendant and consult with defense counsel, right?
That is correct.
And you weren't rushed in doing your report.
I don't think I was.
Okay. And if you felt there was some more mitigating information out there in the world, like you talked to the neighbor, if you thought there was something else, you would have looked into that, correct?
That's correct.
Was there anything, doctor, that you saw referenced in anything that was provided to you or that you learned from the defendant and you said, you know what, I haven't seen that, I would like to see that? Anything that you wanted to see that was not provided to you?
Okay, correct.
I'm asking you, was there anything in addition to what you have that you said, I would like to see something else that was not provided to you? Were you given everything you asked for?
As far as I'm aware of.
All right, doctor, we're going to spend some time on your June 16th report, but before we review that, doctor, did you listen to the testimony presented by the prosecution last Thursday and Friday?
I did.
Okay. And you've never spoken to any of the investigators in this case before, correct?
I have not.
And you've not spoken to Keegan or Heidi or Ms. Gibson Marshall or Ms. Darnell, the witnesses who testified who were in the school, right? You've never spoken with them.
I have not.
Okay. So when you heard their testimony, doctor, did that have any impact whatsoever on your opinion?
It hasn't changed my opinion.
Okay. All right, doctor. So now I'm going to focus on your June report, and I want to turn to page 4 and in the section under Ethan Family Tree and Early Influence, you represent ACEs, right? On page 4 of the June report.
That is correct.
All right, and Doctor, you don't reference the study that you're talking about there. You provide a footnote at the bottom, but it doesn't give me a journal or a place to find that specific report. Do you have a site for that with you?
Can you rephrase that, please? I'm not sure what you're asking me.
All right, so if you look at your footnote 2 on page 4, you talk about the adverse childhood experiences study, child abuse and public health, but there's no citation. You list some authors, but I wasn't able to find that specific report. Do you have a citation? Some way to find that specific report?
So just for clarification, in my testing, the ACEs consist of 10 questions. And the more ACEs that are present, the more the probability exists that this person is going to have issues. In my more than 16 hours of interviewing Ethan, I obtained the ACEs information from him. So if you're asking me that I administered the ACEs, there was no need to.
Okay, but
The question is for this footnote, do you have a specific citation for this footnote that would help aid in trying to find this article?
The citation is listed there where it says the adverse childhood experience study and the author, Dr. Robert Ander from the Center for Disease Control.
and what I'm telling you, doctor, is I Googled that. I tried to look it up, but without a citation, I was not able to find that specific report. And I'm asking you if you have a citation so I could reference the exact report you're referring to.
This is what I looked at, sir, in terms of the ACEs coming out of the CDC.
Do you have a copy of that, doctor? The report you're referencing in footnote 2?
I don't have a copy with me. I looked at a study coming out of the CDC and Kaiser pertaining to the ACEs.
So, doctor, I think this was in your slide, but that study looked at the adverse health effect on the child, right? In this case, the defendant, not on, so the things they would experience later in life because of the ACEs, right?
That is correct.
Health effects and heart problems and stress and all these things, right?
That is correct.
The reason I'm asking for the study is because in your description on paragraph 4, you say that ACEs culminate in numerous antisocial activities such as aggressive acts, unwarranted violence, and heinous crimes. And I couldn't find that anywhere in relation to ACEs. And I'm asking you, where do you get that from?
Sir, if you were to research and look at the information surrounding the ACEs study, I think it was conducted in 95 and 97. My dates could be off of 17,000 subjects. There is a litany of information in terms of what happens to someone who possesses these X amount of ACEs.
And so the problem is, doctor, you can't give me that report. You can't cite that to me so I can question you about that.
Okay.
So, doctor, you talked about a 10 question survey. And in fact, you just said you didn't need to score them. You didn't attempt to score them, did you?
I did not administer the ACEs because I administered 15 psychological tests that provided me the information I needed to reference the ACEs.
All right, doctor. So you say there's studies out there that can trace an ACEs score to other effects, but you didn't need to give it to trace it to other effects. You had other testing. You don't need ACEs. That's your testimony.
I got that information from testing Ethan over 15 different test and screening measures.
All right. And so how hard is it to give someone an ACEs score? Ask the 10 questions.
Actually, it's not difficult at all.
Okay, but you didn't do it.
There was no need to.
All right. And you agree with me that in fact, you need a score of 6 or more to be predictive. That was your testimony on direct, correct?
So what I said was 6 or more can predict. It's a predictor. It's not a precise screening measure that this person will have these type of problems.
Doctor, you relied largely on the defendant's self-reporting for a lot of your analysis, correct?
No, that is not correct.
Okay, let me ask you this. You're aware that he has said that he was not bullied, right? You're aware that he said that
That is correct.
and that he thinks that he had an okay home life, right? That's his opinion,
That's his opinion.
right? You know that he didn't suffer any sexual abuse, right?
I'm not aware of that, sir.
Physical abuse?
That is debatable.
Okay, so doctor, can you, as you sit here today, can you tell the court that in fact this defendant has a score of 6 or higher on ACEs?
Absolutely.
All right, so you can score him on ACEs right now.
100%.
Okay, let's do that. Take me through the testing, take me through the 10 questions, and let's talk about his score.
So I don't have the question in front of me, but I can ask some of the questions to get the information to that question. I'll be happy to walk you through.
Okay, please.
Okay. You want to ask about,
Doctor, so we're clear. I don't care what you want to ask about. I want you to tell me the defendant's ACEs score. That's what I want to know. You said you didn't do it, you didn't need to, but now I want to know what his score is.
so I was very clear with you that I administered 15 tests. And I said I did not administer the ACEs. I was very clear about that.
You did, and then you just told me you could do it right now.
I said I can give him an ACEs score based on the 15 tests that I administered.
All right, doctor. So why don't you give me his ACEs score based on the 15 tests you administered?
So his score will probably range somewhere between 6 to about 8.
And that's based on the other tests that you gave him.
Yes, sir.
And that's not anywhere in your report. You agree?
I did not administer the ACEs.
Doctor, on page 6 of your report,
Before we get too far from this issue, there was something I wanted to clear up. When the prosecutor asked you about physical abuse, your answer was debatable. What did you mean by that?
Sir, if a child is injured and the parent does not take action, that is considered physical abuse. When Ethan fell in the diner and hit his head, and the owner said, I need to call 911 and didn't, I consider that physical abuse.
all right. So
Before you move on, is that the only thing that you consider as physical abuse as it relates directly to this defendant?
Additionally, when Ethan was with his parents and fell again and reported a loss of consciousness and was not taken to seek medical attention, I also consider that to be physical abuse.
Thank you. People, you may continue.
thank you, Your Honor. On page 6, doctor, in the last sentence of exposure to violent scenes, you make the statement, quote, this mentality is typical of persons who spend an inordinate amount of time ingesting violent content. You see that?
Page 6, what paragraph?
It's the last sentence under exposure to violent scenes.
Yes, sir.
Doctor, you don't cite anything for that, do you?
There is no citation here.
Okay, what do you base that on?
I base it on my clinical experience, sir.
Doctor, I mean, that's been studied, hasn't it?
It has.
It's been largely debunked. Isn't that true?
That is not true.
Okay, can you cite me anything?
So
Any literature that substantiates that?
I'm happy to respond. So it's hotly debated as to whether if one is exposed to frequent scenes of violence and carnage, if that exposure has an adverse effect on that child. Some experts say no, and some experts say yes. I can cite you Eric Erickson, developmental psychologist, who chronicles that between the ages of 0 to 5, a child learns most of his core values. In fact, children absorb what they observe.
So doctor, thank you for that answer, but the defendant's playing of video games actually post dates this thinking, right? He reports having violent thoughts long before he played any of those video games. Isn't that true?
That is true.
Okay, so you can't have cause and effect. where the violent thoughts are caused by the video games he played later. Would you agree with me?
Can you rephrase that question, please?
Having violent thoughts at age 5 or 6, and he plays video games at age 13, you would agree with me the video games didn't cause the thoughts.
Sure didn't make them better.
Okay, so you're saying a person who already had violent thoughts was urged on by the video games he was watching.
What I am saying is that at age 6, if you're having aberrant thoughts and you engage yourself in frequent exposure to video games, it's not going to make you a better person.
We can agree on that, Doctor.
Thank you.
All right, Doctor, on page 7, you talk about mental illness, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you cite this, you cite the statutory definition of mental illness, and you also reference something you refer to as, quote, the Miller factor. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
Doctor, which Miller factor are you referring to?
The Miller factor of 2012, or the Miller hearing of 2012.
So, Doctor, we walked through at the start of your testimony what the 5 Miller factors are from the United States Supreme Court. There are 5 of them. And what I'm asking you is, when you say in the last line of the first paragraph under evidence of mental illness, you say, taking into consideration certain factors known as, quote, the Miller factor. And what I'm saying is, when you're talking about mental illness, which Miller factor are you talking about?
The inability to extricate oneself from a dysfunctional family.
All right. So you're saying the second, his family and home life is where you would put mental illness.
Family and home life. Yes, sir.
Doctor, you say that the defendant, and this is in the last full paragraph on page 7, that the defendant is without question someone who is mentally ill. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
And you base that on the text messages that you cite in the pages following and some testing you did, correct?
I based that on my clinical interviews. I based that on my testing using objective testing methods.
So I just want you to look at the sentence that follows that. It says a review of his verbalization through text messages and psychological testing substantiate this assertion, right?
Yes, sir.
And then you reference a group of roughly 200 text messages, correct?
Yes, sir.
Doctor, the statutory definition of mental illness in criminal law relates to the question of criminal responsibility. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, sir.
Have you testified previously about criminal responsibility?
I have.
All right. And that has to do with whether the defendant has a viable insanity defense, true?
That is correct.
Doctor, you reviewed Dr. Aniker's report, correct?
I did.
And would you agree with me that it's a very thorough report?
I do not.
Okay, what's missing?
I looked at Dr. Aniker's report, and in all of my years of testing, and this is, of course, no disrespect meant, sir. I'm just giving a factual response to your question. Not one testing was done in Dr. Aniker's report. In Dr. Aniker's report, Ethan expressed hearing voices and seeing things. In Dr. Aniker's report, Ethan said that at age 6, he went up to the preschool person, and this is what he said: "Wouldn't it be cool if cars can just crash into this school and kill a lot of people?" And the person said, "Then why would you say that?" That is referenced in Dr. Aniker's report, sir.
Right, it is, exactly. Why is that a problem or something missing in her report?
So to conclude that such a person does not have mental illness is striking.
All right, so doctor, other than the absence of testing, anything else that you where you disagree that it's a thorough report?
It is not, sir.
Okay, outside of the testing, what else do you think is missing?
So to diagnose someone with mental illness, there's 3 ways to do that. You look at the brain,
Which you did not do, correct?
I did not do.
Correct.
you test the brain,
correct?
which I did, times 15.
Okay.
Then you use cluster of symptoms using the DSM. That is the Bible or the Quran for psychologists. There is no evidence that that was done. And then the fourth way, which most people do, is to guess. I did not see 1, 2, 3.
Okay, doctor, you both didn't test the brain, right?
I'm sorry?
Neither of you tested the brain. You've agreed with that. You didn't give him an MRI. Neither of you did. Neither you nor Dr. Aneker tested the brain.
No, that is not true.
I'm sorry, imaged the brain.
Thank you. I
Okay,
did not.
So number one, neither of you did number one.
That is
And,
correct.
and your testimony is you did number two. You gave him 15 tests, right? And you're saying Dr. Aneker did not.
It was
right.
not evident in the report.
Okay. And you're testifying that the third method is to look at the reported symptoms, correct?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, that's exactly what Dr. Aneker did. She included that. She just disagreed with your conclusion, right? She didn't deny he had symptoms.
I don't think that's true, sir.
You just referenced her talking about this report to the person on the playground at the school, right? She included that, right?
Her conclusion was that he's not mentally ill.
That's right, doctor. In fact, she cites all the text message and many more than you do that when he talks about, I have hallucinations, right? She includes that in her report. Would you agree with me?
He did.
Okay. So what I'm trying to get at, doctor, is I asked you if it's a very thorough report. You said no. You said she didn't do testing. And I'm asking you, what else do you think was not in her report that makes it not complete or thorough?
Looking at cluster of symptoms, looking at the DSM, and based on the guidelines of the DSM, which is a diagnostic and statistical manual. If someone tells you as a psychologist, I am hearing voices. If someone tells you as a psychologist, I am seeing things. And if you look at their text messages, and in their text messages, it's replete with, I am seeing things. There's a demon in my house. Let me take a video. That is evidence of mental illness, sir. Mental illness is real.
So doctor, you have not answered my question. I'm not asking you if you disagree with Dr. Aneker because I know you do. What I'm asking you is she references all of that in her report and she disagrees with your conclusions. And I'm saying what else is missing from her report? Could you just answer just that question, please?
I don't know what else is missing from our report.
Okay,
sir.
so just the testing.
I don't know what else is missing from her report, sir.
All right. And in fact, her report cites extensively from the record. Would you agree? She cites a lot of text messages. Would you agree?
Yes, sir.
And extensively from the journal. Would you agree?
Yes, sir.
She talks about his internet searches. Would you agree?
Yes, sir.
The bird video,
Yes, sir.
the video of the school shooting,
Yes, sir.
her own questions of the defendant, his responses regarding those things, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Other than your disagreement on the diagnosis, is there anything in Dr. Aneker's report that you believe is factually incorrect?
So, sir, just to clarify, my response is not my disagreement with Dr. Aneker's report. I have never met Dr. Aneker. What I am saying is that I don't know what her conclusions are based on. I don't know. It's not on the DSM. It's not based on testing. I don't know what the conclusions are based on.
Doctor, I've asked you a straightforward question is, are any of anything in her report factually incorrect? It's a yes or no question, whether you believe she had something that's factually incorrect.
It's difficult for me to answer that question, sir.
Well, you didn't highlight or note that she got something wrong, did you, in terms of the facts?
And the reason why it's difficult for me to answer that question.
Doctor, you can address that and redirect. I'm not concerned with why it's difficult.
Thank you.
Okay. Just one moment.
Yes.
All right.
Doctor, I'd like to show you Dr. Aniker's report. You indicated you did review it, correct?
I did, sir.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, and could you just reference which exhibit that would be in your binder?
Your Honor, this is not yet an exhibit, but I am going to move to admit it. Doctor, may I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Doctor, I'm showing you what's been marked as People's Exhibit 64. You recognize that?
I do, sir.
Is that the report you reviewed?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, this time I move to admit People's proposed 64.
Any objection?
No objection.
Thank you. Plaintiff, excuse me, people 64 is admitted.
Provide the court with a copy.
Yes, please.
All right, Doctor, I want to look at page 61 of Dr. Aniker's report. I want to read you some statements from Dr. Aniker's report and ask you if you agree with them. Pretty close to the end, Doctor. It's 67 pages, I think, and it's page 61.
Thank you. I'm there now.
All right, so I'm looking at the first full paragraph on the page, and I'm going to go through a few of the statements there. If you look at the first sentence, Dr. Aniker indicates, when considering the question whether the defendant was experiencing a substantial disorder of thought at the legally relevant time, there is no indication from objective sources that the defendant engaged in unusual behavior that would be typical of psychosis in and around the time of the alleged offenses. Do you see that?
I see that, sir.
Do you agree with that?
I don't know what those objective sources are that she's referencing, sir.
Well, that's what my question to you, Doctor. She says there aren't any. And what I want to know is, do you have any objective sources that the defendant was experiencing or was showing unusual behavior that would be typical of psychosis in and around the time of the alleged offenses? Do you have any objective sources you would point to?
I do.
Please tell us, Doctor.
We all saw the video, sir.
The video of the shooting.
We saw the video of the shooting.
All right. And you're saying he's exhibiting signs of psychosis during the video of the shooting.
We saw the video that he made the night before. We listened to him saying, "I am a demon."
I'm glad you brought that up, Doctor. Do you know what that's in reference to?
I don't know.
Do you know who the defendant's idol is?
I don't know.
You didn't ask him that?
No, I don't know.
He references it in the journal. Did you not read the journal?
I read his journal.
Okay. And you know he idolizes another school shooter. Are you aware of that?
I am aware of that.
Okay. And do you know that the reference to a demon is a direct reference to that other school shooter?
So for someone to verbalize that tells me that person has a serious thought disorder.
So if I say to you, Doctor, you know, that other school shooter referenced demons and I really think he's great, you're going to say, I have some evidence of psychosis because I referenced that and I admire that person.
I would say you have some serious issues.
Any other objective evidence?
I'm sorry, sir.
Any other objective sources that you would rely on other than the two videos you just referenced?
Objective evidence will be testing, which wasn't done.
No, Doctor, objective sources means independent, not self-reporting. A lot of your testing is self-reporting. I'm talking about objective sources. Let's help with this, doctor. Can you explain to the court the difference between objective sources and subjective sources?
Sure. Objective sources are sources that are devoid of my opinion and that exist. Subjective sources are sources where I can infuse my opinions and thoughts. That's my definition.
The doctor, it's not just your opinion, it's also the defendant's opinion. You're looking for something that is not based on his opinion or yours, that's objective. So you'd agree, like, the videos are objective. The video is the video, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But the defendant's statements, your take on them, that's not objective. You agree with me?
Okay.
And what I'm asking you is, do you have any other objective sources that Mr. Crumbley engaged in an unusual behavior that would be typical of psychosis in around the time of the alleged offense?
I do not.
Okay. All right, moving down that paragraph, doctor, it says, and this is Dr. Anaker's analysis, there is ample audio and video recordings of Mr. Crumbley both immediately before and immediately after the shooting. In none of the videos that this writer reviewed does he appear to be in the midst of a psychotic episode. In the videos immediately after the shooting, the defendant is observed communicating clearly with the police in a way that appears rational and relevant, suggesting reality-oriented thought processing. Are you aware of the video that she's referring to?
I am not, sir.
Okay, did you review videos of him shortly after the shooting?
I did not see the videos of him outside of the school.
So you did not see the videos of him in the sheriff's department vehicle?
I did not, sir.
And you did not see the videos of him sitting at the sheriff's department substation?
I did not.
Would you agree that those are objective sources that would allow you to get a look into what the defendant was, how he was behaving, and whether he was engaged in unusual behavior around the time of the shooting?
I do agree, sir.
And you did not see those, correct?
I did not see those videos.
She goes on to note, in that time frame, the defendant does not mention demons, paranoia, hallucinations, or delusions. He follows commands and answers all questions asked of him in a coherent manner. He does not appear to sound or behave in a disorganized manner. You don't have a basis to disagree with that. You didn't watch those videos.
I actually agree with that opinion, sir.
Okay. He follows commands, answers all questions in a coherent manner. You agree?
I do agree, sir.
All right. Also, there's documentation from the jail, which I think largely consists of Dr. Kadir's reports. Also, the reports that deputies do when they go by on watch and they make notations about the defendant. Did you see those reports?
I did, sir.
And the defendant was constantly monitored, correct?
Yes, sir.
Either continuously or every 15 minutes, right?
Yes, sir.
And so those observations are recorded by the officers that are watching him, right?
Yes, sir.
And would you agree with Dr. Anaker that there's no evidence that Mr. Crumbley exhibited thought process? I'm sorry, that the videos tend to show that he exhibited thought processes that were grossly organized, goal-directed, and linear, with behavior that was appropriate. Jail staff did not observe him to be responding to internal stimuli. Would you agree with that?
No, sir.
Okay. Tell me why you disagree.
The entire courtroom watched 5 videos of Ethan Crumbley in psychosis.
Okay. And I understand that's your testimony, doctor. That comes much later. Right now, I'm talking about around the time of the shooting.
Okay.
And what I'm asking you is, when Dr. Anaker is talking around the time of the shooting, would you agree that the defendant exhibited thought processes that were grossly organized, goal-directed, and linear, with behavior that was appropriate? Jail staff did not observe him to be responding to internal stimuli. I'm talking about in that time frame right around the shooting, within a few days.
So I do not understand the question. I don't know if you're talking about while he was in the school, at the sheriff's office, or the Oakland County Jail. I want to answer you, but I want to understand what it is that you're asking of me, sir.
Let's start from where the shooting video starts until he leaves Children's Village.
Yes, sir.
Right. during that time, would you agree that he's exhibiting thought processes that were grossly organized, goal-directed, and linear with behavior that was appropriate, and jail staff did not observe him to be responding to internal stimuli? Do you agree with that?
Okay,
Do you agree with that?
yes, sir.
Can you briefly explain, Doctor, what does responding to internal stimuli mean?
So an internal stimuli is responding to auditory hallucination. And what that means is that it happens in an episodic manner. So I could be experiencing internal stimuli right now, and then I can step away and I am not experiencing internal stimuli. It is a very dynamic process.
So, Doctor, I understand that you're saying that when someone responds to internal stimuli, that can come and go, right?
Absolutely.
They might one day be doing it or one moment, and then later they're not, correct?
Yes, sir.
And what I'm asking you is, what does that look like when they are responding to internal stimuli? What does that mean?
So it varies from person to person. Some people may smile inappropriately, and some people may try to mask what they're hearing by pretending that they're not hearing. And then you have some folk who may actually respond to internal stimuli.
Okay.
So people react differently based on the source of that stimuli.
All right. And you would agree what that boils down to for the layperson is someone is seeing or hearing things that aren't there, right? It's something that is internal to them and not in the world that all of us are observing.
Yeah, it's their perception.
So, Doctor, I think you testified that you believe the defendant has a mental illness that constitutes a substantial disorder, correct?
I did.
And that you believe it significantly impaired his judgment, behavior, and capacity to recognize reality?
I did.
And Doctor, is it your testimony that this defendant is not criminally responsible?
My testimony is that Ethan Crumbley is mentally ill.
I understand that. And now I'm asking the next question, which is it your testimony that he's not criminally responsible?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. That is not what we are here to argue today. We are not arguing criminal responsibility. The defendant has pled and we withdrew our insanity defense notice.
May I respond, Your Honor? I
Yes.
think it's very important whether this doctor thinks that he is not criminally responsible. If that's his opinion, I think the court can take that into consideration.
If your objections overruled, I will allow some leeway. You may continue.
So Ethan Crumbley has pled guilty to the crimes. The facts are the facts, and they cannot be taken back, sir.
Doctor, that's not my question to you. My question is, you understand the legal concept of criminal responsibility, and you yourself have prepared reports regarding criminal responsibility in other cases, correct?
That is correct.
So you understand the legal standard.
Yes, sir.
You know, the first step is mental illness that's a substantial disorder that significantly impairs the defendant's judgment, behavior, capacity to recognize reality, right?
Yes, sir.
And you've already testified, in your opinion, he meets that criteria, right?
Yes, sir.
And now I'm asking you the second step. Do you believe that he's criminally insane?
I believe he's mentally ill, and his mental illness played a factor into the events of the shooting.
So, doctor, it's a yes or no question. Do you believe he's criminally insane, or do you not believe that?
He's already pled guilty, sir.
Please answer the question directly, doctor. If you can, please re-ask your question.
Is it your opinion that this defendant meets the legal definition of criminal insanity? Is that your opinion?
I don't think so, sir.
Okay. And why is that?
Can you rephrase that question, please?
Why is it that you believe he suffers from a statutorily defined mental illness, but you do not believe that he's criminally insane?
So I believe he has a diagnosable mental illness, and he engaged in a horrific act which took the lives of several students, and he's pled guilty. And my understanding is that he was found to not be criminally insane, and I will go with that opinion, sir.
Okay. And you know from your own work what the second step is after mental illness, right? What is the second step? What is it that this defendant does not have that makes him not criminally that makes him not insane?
It's a very high standard one has to prove. One has to prove that a mental illness was directly related to the act that followed.
Right, and so doctor, the legal term is that the defendant in fact appreciates the nature and quality of the wrongfulness of his conduct. That's the standard, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, to the lay person, it means the defendant knew right from wrong, right?
That is correct.
All right. So doctor, one of the things you rely on to substantiate the mental illness and this psychosis you talk about are the text messages that you include in your report, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you say that the statement that he's without question someone who's mentally ill is substantiated by those text messages. And I want you to turn to the pages of your report that include those. That's pages 8 through I think 21.
You just reference which report, the June or January.
The June report. Thank you, Your Honor. And I'm going to try to stick to the June report now.
Thank you.
What page, sir?
So the text messages, I think, start at the bottom of page 7 of your report.
Okay.
And there are 14 pages, and I think you've agreed with me, ballpark about 200 text messages, correct?
Yes, sir.
How many text messages did you actually review?
I don't have an exact number, and so I can't give you an answer to that. What I do know, I reviewed, and again, I don't want to give an incorrect answer, but I'm thinking I saw 20,000 text messages.
Okay. So how did you decide out of all the text messages, which ones to include in your report?
I decided based on the fact of just logic and process of elimination, because it's not appropriate. I didn't feel for me to include 20,000 text messages in a report. It wouldn't serve anyone any good. So I looked for themes. What are the themes in the text messages? And I included those that I felt were in that theme of mental illness.
So doctor, that's actually very remarkable to me. You reviewed 200, you pulled 200 text messages out of roughly 20,000, right?
That is correct, sir.
Okay. And you said you chose themes that sort of brought out what you were trying to illustrate and that supported your opinion that the defendant suffers from mental illness, correct?
Okay.
And doctor, all of the texts you cite are from one date, April 5th of 2021. You want to take a look at your report?
Certainly. That is correct, sir.
So you cite about 1% of all the text messages and all from the same date. And you indicate that 1% one day substantiates mental illness, correct? That's the basis of your opinion.
So the basis of, no, that is not correct, sir.
Okay. How come you didn't cite any other text messages, doctor?
A number of the text messages were not germane to the report. They were just innocuous. I can give you examples if you want, sir.
Let's turn this around, doctor. You agree with me, you cited only from one day, correct, in your report? Okay. And what you're telling me is the only germane text you found were from one day.
That is correct.
And it's like, I gotta do the math. 7 months before the shooting, correct?
That is correct.
And so everything you saw, you say that one day, that's the one I'm going to hang my hat on. That's the one that tells me that he suffered from a mental illness when he committed the shooting, right?
That is not correct.
Okay. Explain that to me.
My opinion and my conclusions are based on my testing.
All right. Thank you, doctor. So, doctor, someplace in your report, I think it's after the text messages, you reference the time of those texts. You recall that? I'll find the page. It's page 22, and it's the third bullet point at the top.
That is correct.
And you say most messages were sent around 4 a.m., correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was remarkable to you and significant, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Doctor, are you familiar with something called UTC?
Can you spell it out to me, sir?
It's U, the letters U, T, and C. It stands for Coordinated Universal Time. I know the letters are out of order, but it stands for Coordinated Universal Time. Are you familiar with that?
I don't know if I am, sir.
All right. So, doctor, you based your assumption that these messages were sent around 4 a.m. based on the little time indicators for each message, right? They each say 4, 5, 20, 21. They start at 3:50 a.m. and they go until 4:41 a.m. You see that?
Okay, I agree, sir.
And doctor, in fact, those every one of them says afterwards UTC plus 0, right?
Okay,
And you agree with that we're on Eastern time, right?
that is true.
And are you aware that Eastern time is UTC minus 4?
Okay,
You aware of that?
okay, sir. Yes,
So those messages were in fact sent between 11:50 a.m. and 12:41. I'm sorry, 11:50 p.m. and 12:41 a.m. Are you aware of that?
I am not, but I agree.
So your assumption that they were sent around 4 a.m. is it's just that's an assumption you made, and it's just not true.
Okay,
Doctor, you testified that you have seen the defendant recently, or at least during your testing, and that you agree he is competent to stand trial.
I did.
Okay. Doctor, you were played the jail camera video, right? That you discussed where the defendant is showing signs of distress and upset, and I think you say psychosis, right?
Yes, sir.
Doctor, the prosecution brought that to your attention, to the defense attention, right? We're the ones who said this is concerning behavior, right?
That is correct.
All right. And you then reviewed that, didn't you?
That is correct.
And you consulted with counsel and you were asked your opinion, right?
That is correct.
About whether this person was psychotic or competent and able to proceed with this hearing, right?
That is
And
correct.
you said he is, right?
Yes, sir.
You also would agree with me that that behavior comes after the defendant had been in the jail in a one-person cell for 16 months.
That is correct.
And you would agree with me that the defendant was not behaving that way right before, during, or after the shooting. You'd agree with me.
Okay,
Would you agree with that?
I don't have evidence otherwise, so yes,
Okay. He wasn't behaving that way when you interviewed him, right?
he was not.
He hasn't been behaving that way during this hearing, right?
That is correct.
And so this is the only incident you're aware of where the defendant exhibited that kind of behavior.
Can you rephrase that question, please, sir?
This is the only incident you're aware of where the defendant has exhibited that kind of behavior.
Are you referencing those 5 videos?
I'm referencing, yes. Are you aware those are all from the same incident, all from one date?
I'm not sure.
Okay, I'm going to tell you that they are, but what I'm asking is, outside of those 5 videos, are you aware of any other instance where the defendant was behaving like that or showing those symptoms?
Actually, I am.
Okay,
There are serious concerns about suicidal ideation, which is why he was on suicidal watch.
so doctor, those are instances where he had something in his cell, might be trying to tie it to a speaker. He said he wasn't suicidal, but they were concerned, right?
That is correct.
There were a few times when they thought he needed to be observed constantly because he showed concerns about suicide, right?
That is correct.
That's not the same as psychosis, is it?
Actually, for one to try to harm themselves is an expression of mental illness.
I asked you about psychosis,
Psychosis means a break from reality.
right? And someone thinking about killing themselves is not broken from reality, are they?
Yes, sir.
All right, so you're saying thoughts of suicide are a symptom of psychosis. That's your opinion. That's the testimony you're offering to the court today.
I am.
So, doctor, in the video, you expressed the defendant saying something about God or why didn't you stop it, right?
Yes, sir.
And in your opinion, what do you think he's referring to?
He's saying, God, why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you save her?
Right? And what do you think he's referring to?
Asking God, why did you allow this shooting to take place, even though he did the shooting? Right? That's the
Okay.
break from reality.
Yes. So, doctor, you agree with me? It's your opinion. He's talking about the shooting. And he's saying, why did you let the shooting happen? Right?
Yes,
Dear God. And so you agree with me, that upset was not something that predated the shooting. That's a result of the defendant's own actions. You agree with me?
absolutely.
Thank you. Doctor, you say on page 25 into page 26 of your report, again, the June report, that the defendant reports extreme sorrow. The very last few words of page 25 into page 26. You see that?
Yes, sir.
What do you mean by that?
I have here that, and if I may read this to you, sir,
Please.
and I hope we're talking about the same thing. He reports nightmares, depression, and extreme sorrow over the outcome of his actions.
Right. And so what I'm asking you, that's the sentence I'm talking about, is when you say extreme sorrow, what do you mean?
Ethan is slowly coming to grips with what he did and the horror that transpired at Oxford School, and he's expressing extreme sorrow.
Right. So, doctor, though, that's not what you say at the end of that sentence, is it? You say that he's expressing extreme sorrow over the outcome of his actions.
Correct.
Right. But you don't know what outcome is. Outcome singular, right? And you don't know what outcome that is. So is he extremely sorry that he's in jail?
Sir, Ethan took the life of 4 innocent people. And that is not okay.
We agree on that, doctor. What I'm saying is you don't include in your report that he expressed extreme sorrow for taking the lives of 4 students and shooting 7 other people and terrorizing a school. You don't say that. You say he experiences that over the outcome of his actions. And what I'm saying is, okay, could be that he killed 4 people. It also could be that he's in jail, right?
That is a
It
possibility.
could be that his parents are in jail, right?
I don't know that to be a fact, but okay,
But he could be. Right?
it's possible.
Okay. And he could be experiencing sorrow that he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison.
So we're speculating, but okay.
All right. And what I'm saying is, as you sit here today, you can't tell us which one it is. You don't note it in your report. You just note he was experiencing extreme sorrow over the outcome of his actions.
That's what I have in my report.
Did you observe the defendant's demeanor during the testimony in this hearing?
I did not, sir.
You did not.
No, sir.
When the video of the shooting was shown?
I did not.
When the 2 students were testifying?
I did not.
Do you think that's important?
Do I think what's important?
Whether the defendant feels anything when he hears that testimony or sees that video?
I think it's important.
Doctor, I want to talk to you a little bit about remorse. I think you say that the defendant is sorrowful that he's experienced some remorse. Do you agree with that?
I do.
Doctor, when did the defendant torture baby birds?
I don't have the date in front of me, but there's the videos that he made.
You know roughly when that was?
I know it was before May. It was
Right, okay.
before I interviewed him, but I didn't memorize the date.
Wait, May of 2023 or May of 2021?
Sir, I do not know the date and I do not want to give an incorrect answer.
You watched the bird video, right?
I did.
And you're aware of his torturing baby birds, but you don't know about the time frame for that.
That is correct, sir.
Just one second. On page 26 into page 27, you mentioned several times the stressful experience. You see that?
On page 26.
All right, so page 26 into page 27. Here. You mentioned several times, quote, the stressful event. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
And then you conclude that the defendant probably has PTSD, correct?
Yes, sir.
What is the stressful experience you're referring to in your report? All right, Doctor, I'm sorry, we're looking at page 26 into page 27 of your report, and you refer to the stressful experience. You refer to it four times. You see that?
Yes.
What is the stressful experience you're referring to in your report?
So those are actually questions on the PTSD questionnaire that he endorsed.
And what I'm asking you is, you referred to it multiple times, and I'm asking you, what is the stressful experience?
Of dealing with the consequences of his actions, of
Okay.
dealing with depression, dealing with nightmares, dealing with his current circumstance.
So that's a result of the shooting he committed, not a cause of the shooting he committed. Would you agree with me?
Yes, sir.
All right. So his PTSD, his post-traumatic stress is from the shooting that he committed.
Yes, sir.
Judge, I have quite a few more questions. I did not realize time is.
Sure, we'll take a natural break. Please continue.
All right, Doctor, you indicated at the bottom of page 27 that the defendant, quote, feels guilty all the time. You see that?
I'm getting there, sir.
Page 27.
What part of the page you're looking at?
It is almost the last, it's the second to last sentence on the page.
Yes,
Notable responses to this inventory were the following: I feel guilty all the time, right?
that is correct.
And you don't indicate what he feels guilty for, right?
He actually, this is in reference to the Beck Depression questionnaire. There's a series of questions on there.
Okay.
So the prompt was, do you feel guilty at all? Sometimes. And so he endorsed that.
All right.
He feels guilty all of the time.
All right. So that's just a questionnaire and it doesn't say, what do you feel guilty about? It says, do you feel guilty all the time?
Correct.
Okay. Judge, I do have another series of questions. I think this is for me a natural break if the court is all right with that.
Sure. We can go ahead and take a break. We'll go ahead and break for lunch, but I'm not going to take an extended break as we're going to finish this hearing today. And so with that being said, we'll return at 1 o'clock and we will continue with the cross-examination at that time.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Deputies may take the defendant. Please be seated in the courtroom until the defendant has exited. Thank you. I'll see you all at 1 p.m. The court stands in recess, sir. You may step down.
All rise.